Tom Ripley, a clever man in Italy, jealous of his friend's lover, the beautiful Marge. Making friends with Philippe, he claims to be a childhood friend, but is he really?
Yeah, so let's get into it. We're talking about René Clement. I think that's right.
Yep.
1960 film Purple Noon, French Plein Soleil.
Yep.
Which does not mean Purple Noon.
Nope. And it also at one point was distributed in the United States under the name The Talented Mr. Ripley. So it's a bit confusing.
I saw that note somewhere, and I was like,
there's a preview of it, which is like, Tom Ripley, a clever man in Italy, jealous of his friend's lover, the beautiful Marge. Making friends with Philippe, he claims to be a childhood friend, but is he really? You know, beautiful scene of sailing.
Oh my God, I want to go watch that.
Yeah.
I want to go watch that trailer. That sounds incredible.
Tom Ripley. So it starts out with Tom, and they have renamed Dickie Philippe. Mm-hmm. They are, I believe, American, even though they speak French. It's they're just like the Russians in Hunt for Red
Russians
October.
On the Red October. I was totally going to make that point too.
And
we dispense with all.
There's no New York. We start in Europe. Yep. Tom and Philippe have met. Tom has already charmed him. Later, we get the sense that Philippe's not so sure about Tom, but they seem to be having a great time in Rome, gadding about. They pick up this woman, rob her, have some fun with her, dispense with her.
There's a overly expensive cane fencing shenanigans. Yeah. Where a cane is promoted from a blind man for 20,000 lire and then resold to this poor woman for 30,000 lire.
Just for the fun of it, right?
For the fun of it.
Because Philippe does not need the money. And I shall just say this, listener. If you have not seen this film and you think you know how it's going to end, if you're familiar with the other Tom Ripley films, you might consider pausing and watching it because there are surprises. It makes some choices that you're not necessarily expecting. It definitely diverges from the book. It makes some pretty serious, and we're gonna spoil those. So if you don't want those spoiled, hit pause, go watch the movie, come back.
Yeah, go enjoy a splendid 2 hours on the Côte d'Azur. Yeah.
It's great. Yeah. So they return to Montebello. Marge, who is the French version of Marge, is upset. There's some ballet dancing. We're not sure if Marge is one of the dancers or not. There's some seduction. Freddie Miles shows up, and he invites them on a trip. He, again, does not like Tom, but he invites them on a trip to some port or another, and rather than it being a sailing or a skiing trip, they're going to take a sailing trip on Philippe's beautiful ketch. And I'll let you take it from there.
Philippe and Tom are, the relationship between Tom and Dickie and all the other Ripley stuff we've considered is wary but warm a lot of the time. This is way more like a Mean Girls kind of like friendship. And Philippe plays a pretty mean trick on Tom where he kind of strands him in the dinghy behind the sailboat and goes below decks to have sex with Marge. The rope snaps, stranding Tom in the middle of the ocean, not unlike Pip the Sailor Boy from Moby Dick. I was definitely like, oh my gosh, that's where we are. Philippe realizes his error, turns around, goes and finds Tom. He's horribly sunburned. But they kind of make up.
Philip realizes he went too far. He feels genuinely guilty, even though you're right. He seems perfectly happy with Tom in Rome, but then when he's back with Marge, he seems to be growing tired, and he bullies him a little bit.
Yeah. Tom, either by intent or happenstance, has a pair of women's earrings from the cane woman in Rome. And he slips those into Philippe's pocket in order to make Marge jealous. It works. Philippe and Marge have a fight. Marge takes off and heads back to Montebello. Tom and Philippe get back on the boat, and
Philippe finds some evidence that Tom has kind of pilfered some of his bank account statements. Philippe's not sure what to make of it, but he says, "What, are you planning on stealing my identity or something like that?" And Tom's sort of like, "Yes, I am." And we can't tell if they're joking. I don't think Philippe is sure if Tom is joking or not, but there's something menacing about the whole thing. So Philippe tries to kind of buy him up. They have a game of poker. Again, they're still sort of being friendly. Philippe lets him win with the idea of like, here, you won a lot of money, now go leave me alone. Also, Tom is constantly nagging him to go back to San Francisco so he can get the $5,000 that Philippe's father, Herbert Greenleaf, has promised him. He gets the sense that Philippe is not going to go back. He refuses to get bought off and then suddenly stabs Philippe to death with a knife. And similar in some ways to other versions of this story, he struggles to dump the body in the water, but he goes over to and barely rescues himself. But he survives. He gets back on the boat and sails it back to Montebello, where he has a rather bumpy landing at the slip.
It's true. Yeah. And then basically for the rest of the film, it's a lot of Tom stealing Philippe's identity.
Right.
And the scene where Freddie Miles suspects him is almost exactly the same.
Yep.
Freddie comes up. He's suspicious. Freddie goes down. The housekeeper sort of lets the cat out of the bag. Freddie comes back up.
The cat in this case is that's Signor Greenleaf, not Signor Ripley. And so Freddie learns, oh, he's impersonating Philippe.
Tom brains him with a large jade Buddha instead of an ashtray this time.
Maybe a nod to Freddie's corpulence.
Perhaps, yeah. And the inspector does make an appearance, as in all of the other Ripley IPs that we've read, but like is much more convivial and like kind of believes Tom pretty much right off the bat. And then in a swerve from everything else we've done, Tom kind of sets about seducing Marge and does so successfully. Mr. Greenleaf does appear. Marge heads off to meet him. Mr. Greenleaf is here to sell the boat that is Philippe's, but Tom is trying to get rid of it because he's in debt. And we have a final grand reveal in the last moments of the movie, which is...
the boat is lifted out of the water into dry dock so they can inspect the hole. And when the boat is dragged out of the water, attached to the stern post is the rope that Tom had enshrouded Dickie with. It had gotten tangled, and with it is dragged the corpse of Philippe for Marge and everyone to see.
And our very final shot is Tom, who thinks he's gotten away with it, being summoned from the terrace to get his comeuppance.
Wonderful shot. Wonderful. Tom is in his tiny Italian bathing suit, drinking something like a port or a sherry by the water, happy, content as like a cat napping on a sunny day who's gotten away with murder, and he is caught. The other thing we should say, too, is that it's a little bit confusing why Tom seduces Marge. Maybe he's attracted to her. Certainly he seems like he was jealous of her attention with Philippe. So that might be part of it. But one of the things he does is writing a letter as Philippe leaves a large sum of money for Marge. So in seducing Marge, he has set himself up potentially to marry her and thus to get control of Philippe's fortune without being suspected of it, which, could have worked out very well for him, but it didn't.
Right. Yes. It was one of those moments where the detailing of the props becomes really important because the what he used to kind of wrap up Dickie's body is in fact a cable. And so you're like, okay, this would survive. Like the body would stay attached to the rudder.
So first question for you, Chris Bagg, how do you like this ending?
I like it. It's funny. I think you got a question here about efficiency that I think we're going to get to. This film felt brisk and ponderous at the same time. And that is kind of an amazing achievement. I mean, probably not what René Clement was after. But I found...
Oh, I think it was. I think that's very intentional.
The ponderous part?
Well, I think that it's supposed to be languid. Even I think so.
I could see that. Like,
maybe we're using ponderous differently.
No, like languid makes sense, but one of my like hiccups with the film is again a lot like we brought this up before, that once Dickie / Philippe is dead, like an animating impulse kind of goes out of the work. And I found a lot of the toing and froing and the identity thieving in the second hour of the movie, but, just it felt really rote. I had a question that I removed because I wanted to talk about another thing about faithful adaptations. And which is interesting because this film is faithful in some places and wildly divergent in others. And I think the worst moments are when it's really faithful, where it basically just hits the plot numbers as they are in the book without putting the spin on it that the rest of this film does a just wonderful way of doing. And so, like, I was very surprised by the ending. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. Like, and I think even more so made even better by the smug expression on Tom's face as he walks out of the frame to get his comeuppance. And I was like, wow, okay, he got caught. 'Cause this Tom is darker. And I think we're going to get into that in a little bit. But I enjoyed the ending. And it saved what at that point had become a little bit of a like, okay, I know what's going to happen next. I know what's going to happen next. I know what's going to happen next. And then I was like, oh my goodness, that is not what I expected.
See, I'm surprised. I mean, I'm not surprised you like the ending because every time we've talked about Tom Ripley, you're always like, I want him to get caught, and I was like, Chris Bagg gets his wish finally. Like this. And so I thought you were going to love it. But my experience of the film was that it was kind of languid and ponderous until the murder. Yeah. And then the first murder. And then after that, I thought it cooked. I thought it was so much more efficient. It had a lot of the same plot as the novel and the 8-part Netflix series and the Minghella film with like the inspectors and stuff, except for it just cut a lot of the details out and gave you the same feel of like Southern Italian intrigue and like checking into hotels under a different name and exiting quickly and leaving just as the police are showing up without doing as much of that. So I thought for sure you were going to like it just because it just like eliminated a lot of that. And
it did.
To me, I found the second half just like blisteringly fast, without losing the kind of suspenseful feel that the other versions have had.
I mean, like, I like that it was more efficient and I like that it was brisker, but the thing is that it felt like it was just elision. Like it was just stuff taken out and the plot, the major plot points. It felt, pedestrian's not the right word, but more dutiful. Just like, okay, we just got to get from point A to point B. And then, and I want this surprise ending to happen. And so, yeah, the zip went out of it a little bit for me. Because like the whole time that the three of them are on that sailboat and I was just like, this is glorious.
How about that cast? Like those three?
Jesus. What the heck? Like, It's amazing. Like they're all beautiful in very different ways, and they are
Very different
perfectly
ways.
suited to their roles.
Oh, well, I want to skip to this question then, because I think if I had been René Clement and I had read Patricia Highsmith's novel, so just for context, the man who plays Tom Ripley is Alain Dumont, who many people consider to be the most handsome actor ever. Like, usually makes the sort of top 5 list. This was his breakout too. This was a hit, and it was a hit French film. I think it also did okay in the U.S. too. But the guy who plays Philippe is Paul Gégolf. And if I had read the novel, I think my instinct would have been to cast. Maurice Ronet is the guy who plays Philippe. The name I just quoted before was one of the writers. Maurice Ronet. Maurice Ronet is also handsome, but he is less gracile and elegant than Alain Delon. Alain Delon looks like he's 22. I don't know how, he might be 30, but he has no body fat. He's this sort of androgynously masculine, beautiful, blue-eyed dream. Maurice Ronet is also very handsome, but he seems kind of loutish by comparison.
He's got a Daniel Craig, an aging Daniel Craig hotness that, like, except
for like 30, but
but compared to Alain Delon, who is just like smoldering sex pot.
But where I'm going here is that my instinct would have. The descriptions of Dickie, who is renamed Philippe, is Tom, I think we understand, is kind of handsome, but not exceptionally handsome. And Dickie is exceptionally handsome. So I think I would have cast Alain Delon as Philippe, and I would have cast Maurice Ronet as Tom. So question for you, what is the effect of the beautiful, serpentine, slinky Alain Delon as Tom Ripley?
I think this hits my question about guile, because one of the things that really struck me about this was just how like out in the open this Tom is about what he's up to. Like he like smirks and smolders around, and that the poker game, like this Tom is like, I think like sort of psychologically pretty accurate. Like he's a poor kid who is incredibly hypervigilant. He doesn't miss a thing. Yeah. And like Philippe tries to cheat to lose. It's hilarious. He gets dealt 3 of a kind kings. He turns in one of his kings for just 1 card. They're playing 5-card draw. And he is instantly rewarded with a third 10, giving him a full house. And then he has to ditch one of those to get down to 2 a pair. And Tom has a flush, winning, but Tom has noticed that he is basically cheating. It's this incredible little scene that is like brisk and sexy,
which kind of mirrors their life, right?
Yeah, 100%.
You know,
and
Philippe has all the cards.
Like I was going to have this question for you about what is the effect of Tom's guile just like out on the surface. But I think that's one of the reasons why the beauty works, because like you would not kick Alain Delon out of bed. You wouldn't kick him out of your catch. Like there's this incredible shot where Philippe and Marge are sort of like making out on the deck. And in the background, you see Tom's sort of beautiful, languid legs sort of stretched on what it's like. I mean, this is one of those films where you could stop pretty much any of the frames and it's fucking gorgeous. And and so I think that's this Tom is more manipulative, darker, meaner, crueler, and he's kind of he somehow dwarfs Philippe's loudishness, because Philippe is also not a good person.
No,
but I think the beauty is there to make Tom's lack of guile acceptable, because if he didn't have the charisma that he has, there's no way that Philippe would have fallen for him.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree. I also think maybe, the first 10 minutes of this film, there's something awkward about the timing of it, and I was like, I don't know if I'm going to love this. It had that sort of 1950s, like, same feeling you get maybe when you're reading Raymond Chandler or Patricia Highsmith, and it's just like, people don't really talk like this. Like, have you any cigarettes? Not right now. I can go out and get you a pair. Let's cut it up here. I'd like to borrow that cane. You're just like, what is this? But very quickly, I found myself just being mesmerized by the visuals of it. And, color films were rare in France at this time. Not unheard of, but unusual. And I'm sure just the shots of the Côte d'Azur or Montebello, wherever they are, and the beautiful boat, and Marge, and so, I mean, I think maybe part of why I also can tolerate the second half of the film is just lots of Alain Delon sort of brooding. And I just kind of like watching his face. And he is a good actor, too. Like, I found him very believable. He wears his emotions on his sleeve, and so there's always this, like, anxiety. Am I going to get away with it? One of the neat effects about having him as the Tom is that he puts on Philippe's clothes and they're a little too big. And there's almost like a David Byrne effect. The first time he goes in and like tries to sign Richard, Philippe Greenleaf, and there's this sense of imposter. This man's wearing the wrong clothes. But I also feel like you see him becoming more comfortable with the charade as we go through. And even, you have some complaints about the plotting. I guess I don't, but I think part of why it works is that I'd watch Alain Delon, like check into hotels, jump out of windows, lounge around. And not just because he's handsome, there's just a cat-like grace and an incredible vulnerability to his face that I think is just fascinating
he can do
to watch.
Many, many things. And he can do he can do like simmering sexiness. He can do affability. He can be gullible hanger-on. He can be manipulative murderer. I think he's
also good at noticing, as you said earlier, good at noticing details. There's one moment where a police spy is spying on them at a table, and he notices it, and you just get this little like eyes cut to the right, and he notices.
Right.
That's when he sort of seeds the idea that Philippe has gone back to Montebello because he knows he's being spied on.
There's this insane moment where he has. He thinks he's disposed of the body. He's gotten back on board. He goes down below decks. He takes off his shirt, and we get Alain Delon's abs, which are fantastic. And I think he slips on one of Philippe's shirts, and then he notices something, and he actually goes, "Oh!" and he grabs this giant peach and just like eats half of it, and it's like. And like it's one of those things where you're like, this is why French filmmakers are so great, because they're totally fine to be like, let's stick the metaphor in there.
It's not
subtle. We're getting T.S. Eliot. We are getting the Garden of Eden. We're getting like, he's just done the thing. And there's like juice and peach like running down his face. And it's just, I mean, it's really, it's funny. I wish that, I kind of wanted the second half to maybe even be... I wanted him to do some things with the plot in the way that he had done other different things with the plot, but it felt like we just shifted, like it felt like Cliff Notes of The Talented Mr. Ripley.
Yeah, I mean, and I agree. I don't know that those scenes were quite as dramatic as I think other versions of like getting Freddie down the stairs into the car, which is a scene we've now seen
4 times,
depending if you count the book. 4 times. And if we count the Minghella film, which we have not watched together, but we've both seen, and we count the Zalians Netflix Andrew Scott. That version of it was probably the most sort of de rigueur version of it, right? It like barely passes muster. I think there maybe were better moments, sort of after the body is identified and they're having dinner with the opera singer, or moments in the hotel where he ducks into the booth and has to kind of move quickly, or but yeah, those are sort of, I think they get amped up later. I mean, the other observation I would have is that, Minghella's movie is clearly inspired by the book, but I think visually it's also inspired by this movie.
It has to be.
And in fact, Jude Law looks like a mix of the two French actors. It's like if you mush them together, you get Jude Law. And I think there's a moment where Philippe is wearing this like all white suit, maybe with a like a sailor hat and a turtleneck, and I think that Jude Law has the exact same outfit at one point in the Minghella Ripley too.
This film is too beautiful to not mine for visual references till the end of time, basically.
Yeah. And it's a fantasy, right? Like I think I'm letting the plot off the hook a little bit, because it's like, I think it's a quality sort of like the Cherry Orchard has, but also like, the slaying of Abel by Cain, or a Greek myth, which is that the story is just big, and you don't really need a naturalistic telling of it to enjoy it. What you need is a sensualistic telling of it, and boy, do we get that.
And I think you're right, because like, this is the story. It's a tragedy, right? Because like, it is the tragedy of Tom's like hubris and arrogance and his flaws. And so you get the sense that Clement wants to tell that kind of story, and does. He tells the story of a downfall, and the reason is because Tom is obsessed with sensuality. And so this whole film is this like fever dream of sensuality. I think another just wonderful moment is when the inspector is interviewing Tom, and the door to the wardrobe pops open. Yeah. And you see the suit that Tom was wearing last night when he escaped the cops. And if only the inspector, turned to the right, but instead he closes the wardrobe. The inspector does it himself. And the movie is full of these gorgeous moments like that.
Yeah, now that I think about it, there is more potential to mine moments like that for suspense. And I think of the four tellings, it's Minghella who does the best version of that. And, we're going to watch that in a few weeks. But I think he also manages to combine the sensuality of this version with more suspense. And then he pulls off another trick too, which is that I am actually rooting not morally correctly, but I'm rooting for Matt Damon's Tom to get away with it. I was very happy for Alain Delon's Tom to get caught.
Me too.
There's something. I mean, and I think that's the great thing about this story. It is like Chekhov or Shakespeare, which is that you can put different emotional interpretations on these characters. They're specific, but they're also broad enough that I think this story is epic enough that it permits a loudish and brooding Tom, or it permits a sort of innocent, wild-eyed Tom who makes a mistake and then tries to get himself out of it, or something in between those things.
Right, because like, who among us hasn't had this fantasy? Like, if you're not rich, this fantasy of like somehow slipping into it through your own guile and wits, and really like making it. And I think you can really see Alain Delon like thinking he's gotten away with it and then not. My question about Marge is, so almost all of the other versions of the story we've considered, the homoerotic tension between Dickie and Tom is a crucial aspect of the book, and also because we're working with Patricia Highsmith, like it's a crucial part of her identity. And as you pointed out, Tom's seducing of Marge is probably manipulative, and and it's got a real point to it. I didn't sense the same kind of connection between Tom and Philippe in this one. Tom seems mostly to just want to get Philippe's stuff. Like that seems to be the drive. And I was wondering if you felt like that something is lost in this particular version, or if because enough other stuff is added, does it not bother you?
I definitely think that something is lost, but then I also think things are added. And so the question is, does it become zero sum? It also relates to something you brought up about faithful adaptations earlier, too. I probably do like the canonical version of this story in which Tom is a rejected lover. And that's why the murder... I think I probably like that better than this version of the story. But also, when it comes to Tom Ripley, like you and I are in the position of theater critics who've seen like 7 versions of The Cherry Orchard and are ready, show me something new, And,
welcome to our new podcast, This Week in Ripley.
This Week in Ripley. This Week in... show me something new. And so I am game for the filmmaker to make an interpretation of Tom Ripley that's different than what I have in my brain. And I'm up for it. And I enjoy being taken along for that ride. Which one's the better one? Maybe I think the homoerotic subplot is the better one. But this was interesting too. And so... But I also... there was something you said when we were talking about Zalian's Ripley, and you were complaining a little bit about... Maybe it was... Ravini or something, and you referred to diverging from the text. And I thought that was really interesting, because I don't think that filmmakers think of the source material as the text.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
I think when you're interpreting a play, it's the text.
No, it's central. Yeah.
and you might choose to put your own interpretation on it, but you're going to say those lines, or you better have a good reason why. You might change the time setting, but there's a real responsibility to the author. And I think maybe it's just because Hollywood sucks, but I also think it's more a recognition that novels are written to be read and movies are made to be watched and acted, and that what works on the page isn't what always works on screen. Filmmakers have always felt more freedom to reinterpret. And when they license a script and when they adapt a book into a script, I don't think they feel a responsibility to the author's intention. I think that they take inspiration. They might use the setting, the characters' names, the situation. But then if they can tell a better story by making some changes, they do it. And there are some interesting examples of where a more faithful interpretation of a book made a better movie. And the best example I could think of that is the Coen brothers' True Grit, which is a very faithful interpretation of the book. The John Wayne version's actually a pretty good movie, but it's more, they just kind of turn the character into the John Wayne standard character. We're not going to go into the Oklahoma territory with a little girl. What do you think? That just, it's the character he always plays. It's just him again. This time he's got an eye patch, Whereas, watch the Jeff Bridges version of it, and they just revel in that dialogue. And I think that's great, but I also think that's because that's a novel that is written in a very visual, dialogic way. In this case, the novel isn't. What's fascinating about The Talented Mr. Ripley, there are some wonderful moments of prose, but it's just the character, right? Yeah. And the premise. It's just an interesting premise. Here's this guy who's sent to this place, falls in love with the lifestyle, kind of falls in love with the guy, is spurned, all subtextual, and kills him, and then figures out what to do. I mean, that's just a great premise, and you can go a lot of different directions with it. And so, I'm choosing not to be typically mealy-mouthed. I actually do think the Highsmith interpretation is the more interesting, even though I didn't mind that it was abrogated in this case.
Yeah, and I think, I agree with you, and I my stab at why this particular setup is a little less successful is because it just falls into the Tom is a greedy, manipulative person. You know,
which is a little less
right,
interesting.
exactly, and you know, and in all the other Ripley stuff, we have had a really fun time of being like, is it a crime of passion? Is it a cold crime? Is it a like? And here it just feels like a robbery.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I also think, like, probably if you go back to 1960, if you think there aren't that many colored films, there aren't that many movies with the protagonist that's a murderer, probably audiences hadn't seen anything like this before. You know, it's like a combination of like Jacques Cousteau and like Alfred Hitchcock, but with like a sexuality that Hitchcock rarely summoned, especially for men. But then I think Minghella takes that and says, "Thank you very much. I'll use all of that, and I'm going to tell an even better story."
It made me really think about one of my favorite movies, Claire Denis' Beau Travail. Which I really want to watch together at some point. But that film is also a love triangle and also incredibly sensual. But it has the weirdness of Highsmith and Minghella that this film doesn't quite have. For me, the crime is a little too straightforward. Like the motives aren't quite complicated enough. You know, like Philippe is a jerk. Marge is kind of a dupe. Tom is like a manipulative monster. And it's still still great. Like I really enjoyed it, and it's incredibly beautiful, and I would watch it again in an instant. But it's not as psychologically interesting, I think, as some of the other stuff. I agree. I agree with that. I think it's but it's it's saved to some degree by you're right. The murder itself isn't all that interesting, but the way it's shot, like the way you actually see the stab is Tom's feet flexing on the right. Isn't that like you see his hand, but you also see his feet as you can tell what he's doing. He's engaging his entire core. You know, into the stab, but you don't see the knife, and you hear the sound, and there's just lots of wonderful examples of these visuals like that keep you in. I would be up for your sound thing, and then I'd be ready to move. Yeah, the dialogue that is on the screen for me right now is "What if I throw it overboard?"
Got it. Okay.
3, 2, 1, go.
Et si je la fous au jus? Ah.
C'est pas très gentil, ça.
So Philippe is saying he's going to throw the watch overboard.
Do you think Philippe knows?
So Tom has stabbed him.
Philippe's last word is Marge.
Tom is frantically trying to turn the boat because there is another boat nearby that maybe heard Philippe cry out.
Tom is not a good sailor.
No, he's terrible.
The boat's on. Although the trim looks good right now.
I think the next 4.5 minutes are astonishing. Okay, we haven't.
It's like I don't know if you've seen the Gregory Peck Moby Dick, but it really reminded me of that. Around the same time, right?
So we have not heard wind sound like this yet. It is wind and water.
Yeah, it suddenly got a lot louder. It got just chaotic, loud. It went from quiet, tranquil Mediterranean.
It feels like
loud.
Tom might have control of the boat. You know.
Just wrapping him up in a blanket.
The wind really sounds like a storm.
It's wonderful.
We're getting the alarm bell of the boom coming across.
Yep.
Oh, God. The sails are a mess.
Yep. Jib is luffing. Takes a big swig of rum. Courage.
Gets out most of it. The wind.
Again, like the bell is sort of like the watch. We know what you're doing. Criminal. Boom, ever-present risk, constantly swinging over.
Okay, we had this like brief moment of calm, and now he's like, I got to get this body overboard. So he goes and finds the anchor.
The shroud keeps threatening to blow away. We keep seeing Philippe's face.
The hilt of the knife is just sticking up out of Philippe's chest. It is a very windy day. This is an aggressive sailing moment.
And often when you see sailing being shot, they'll pick a calm day to shoot it and then maybe add the wind effects. But like, there's a bit of a sea running. I mean, this is what it's like in blue water sailing, even on a like not particularly stormy day.
Okay, he's almost got the body wrapped up. He's wrapping it in wire, cable. He gets hit by the boom, and he goes over with the body. So he is now hanging on to Philippe's body, being dragged behind the boat. This next shot is almost my favorite of the film. The camera's going above and under the water. Oh. He's hauling himself back up on the boat. He's not the most athletic Tom for all of his like the beauty of his body.
And that's true to Highsmith. Tom is not supposed to be. He's like an actor, but not an athlete.
Philippe's body is being just dragged through the water in the shroud. The sound of the wind has gone down. The sound of the waves has dropped. And there goes Philippe's body.
What he just did was very dangerous, too. It would have been so easy for that tangle to
grab him. Oh, this
shirt's off. Moment.
Downstairs. Towels off.
And this is like Brando, like sort of physicality.
I think that's Philippe's shirt.
Yeah, it's Philippe's shirt for sure.
Oh, he smiles when he sees the peach and then grabs it and eats like half of it in one bite. Okay, that's enough.
And we fade to black.
That is an astonishing 5 minutes of cinema. There's after the music sting, there's no music. And he just turns like this, he does stuff that you would never do. Get all those covers off of those microphones. I want to hear the wind. Turn it up, more wind. Give me all the wave sounds. There's a lot of single shots that go on for a long time. And then I really think that moment of Tom in the water and the camera is half above the water and half under the water. He's trying to get back to the boat. Like that, I think, is a really powerful illusion of what happens in the book. Where we in the Steve Zalian one, we have that scene of him trying to get back into the dinghy for a while, and this is brisker and scarier. And I mean, we're getting Tom's, it's Tom's emotional and psychological state is what's being portrayed here. Like this is like the grand pathetic fallacy, but it's great. It works. It's amazing.
Yeah, and what a brilliant plot device of, rather than doing the Cortina and the trip to San Remo, just put the three of them on the catch. Squish them together, you get the drama, and you're able to make all of the things happen that you need to have happen plot-wise without having to use so many set pieces and so many locations. It works. Yeah, it just works so well.
And maybe that's why I struggled with the second half. Because this first half, I was like, sweet, we're already in Europe. Like, oh my God, we're on the, it's just like boom, boom, boom. And, it's like when you were talking about episode 4 the other day, where it's like, like from start of movie to droids meet Luke is like 15 minutes. And, we're, like Philippe is dead 40 minutes into the film.
I wonder if I just like mid-century banks and American Expresses more than you do. Like I just can watch guys in suits like going into banks and signing things and slipping out and going in
shit.
and saying
like
yeah.
I'll talk to you about Bakelite phones for an hour.
Apparently not. Because it's about an hour.
Yeah. Apparently not. You ready for trivia?
Yeah, yeah. I think I go first this time.
You too.
All right, 1 second. Okay, so we talked about how Alain Dumont, the star of this movie, is often considered to be like the most handsome actor ever. Sort of like France's like James Dean merged with Brad Pitt, kind of like. Yeah. Apparently, according to his mother, that he was also a very attractive baby, and he was such an attractive baby that his mother found it necessary to put a sign on his stroller when she took him out into public. So what did the sign say? Did the sign say A, no more candy, exclamation point, B, you may look, but do not touch, or C, no acting inquiries, please, comma, he already has an agent?
Okay, this would be like early 40s. The first one is no candy, please. Second,
no more candy,
please. No more candy. What was B?
You can look, but don't touch.
B.
Correct.
Yes!
Which, I don't think you'll remember this, but the year that our friend Justin was Guides director, that was also an appendage to the Guides cheer. And there's a very funny story behind that I will not tell. But just think in what context somebody might want to look but not touch.
Some of the guides. Interesting. I will ponder that while we are still recording and then get the full story later. As we talked about earlier, Plein Soleil means full sun or blazing sun, not purple noon, which is the English title. That title comes from a poem by what great romantic poet? And I have the first stanza of it for you. And it is very nicely suited for this film.
Okay.
Stanzas written in dejection near Naples. The sun is warm, the sky is clear. The waves are dancing fast and bright. Blue isles and snowy mountains wear the purple noon's transparent might. The breath of the moist earth is light around its unexpanded buds. Like many a voice of one delight, the winds, the birds, the ocean floods, the city voice itself is soft like solitudes. Were those lines written by Lord Byron, Percy Bysshe Shelley, or John Keats?
I think Lord Byron.
It's Shelley.
I believe I read that Byron and Shelley spent a fair amount of time together in Italy.
Yeah, for sure. Yes, that is true. Yeah, I think if it were Byron, the heat would be up a little more. It would be a little hotter. Shelley always has a quality of introspection and nostalgia. Like Ozymandias is the great poem, which is so good, but has that kind of like everything is past, nothing is kind of working, and Byron is more future looking, is more forward looking for his basically his next conquest.
Right. I haven't read either of them very much. And In fact, of the three, I'm most familiar with Keats, and that did not sound like Keats to me.
It's not. It's overwritten for Keats.
Cool. Well, Chris Bagg, are you going to watch this film again?
Yeah, I'm going to watch it with a lady.
Oh, yeah, that sounds like fun. But not a lady, but not another dude friend. Don't do it on a third wheel date.
Oh my God. Yeah, don't do that.
Hey guys, I have an idea.
What could go wrong?
Does anybody want to play poker?
Oh God, that's a great idea. Yeah, I'll watch it again. Are you going to watch it again?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe not quickly, but I mean, I love French noir, and actually what this made me want to revisit about 10 or 15, it was probably, 2012 or so, I went through a phase where I watched a lot of Jean-Pierre Melville films, many of which star Alain Delon, a little bit when he's a little older, like late 60s, early 70s, and they're great, and I kind of want to go back. I could and watch some more of those too. They're Les Samurai. I remember I saw Les Samurai probably over 20 years ago at the Virginia Film Festival, and that was just a few years after this, also starring Alain Delon. I think I want to go back and watch that
great.
again.
I will check that out. Well, next up is The American Friend, directed by Wim Wenders. It is available to stream at Apple TV and Amazon Prime.
Starring Dennis Hopper as Tom Ripley.
Oh my God, this is going to be so good.
Upper Middle Brow is a Small Point production. Chris Bagg and Jesse Dukes are on a Beam Reach. Music by Ben Pajak and Jesse Dukes. Design and website by Chris Bagg. We are supported by Jenny Grieve and Justin Reich.
But
I haven't looked to see if we have any new ones.
I don't think we have any new ones.
I don't think we do.
But as we just alluded to, if you want to support us, you can come and support our Patreon at the You Really, Really Like Us tier, which gets you some one-on-one editorial time with one of us or the other or both, because Jesse and I are both writers and editors, and we can help you with your writing, podcasting, or editing project. You can see some of our portfolios and learn more at our respective websites, chrisbagg.com and jessedukes.com. Thanks for listening, everybody.
I'm going to go do some push-ups. I kind of had the Alain Delon physique in my early 20s.
You did. You do have that sort of languid body type.
Did.